Donald Trump has for years waged a relentless, un-American campaign against the First Amendment and the tradition of a free and fair press as president. But his latest escalation crosses a new and, as far as we know, unprecedented line. He sought to use the courts to try to compel reporters to take the witness stand. Washington Post today is reporting this, quote, "The Justice Department took the extraordinary step of seeking to force reporters for the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal to testify before a federal grand jury, but withdrew the subpoenas earlier this month after they were challenged by the news organizations." That is according to a Justice Department official familiar with this matter. The Washington Post subpoena was to veteran national security journalist Ellen Nakashima. Her reporting this year has been essential to the public's understanding of Donald Trump's deeply unpopular war in Iran. As the Washington Post reports, quote, "While the journalists are no longer scheduled to appear before a grand jury, the Justice Department's action reflected a new front in the Trump administration's aggressive tactics toward the media as it attempts to crack down on government leaks to the press and content that the administration officials think is unfair to the president." A spokesperson for the Washington Post defended Nakashima's reporting, calling the Justice Department's moves, quote, "another sign of the government seeking to compel journalists to become instruments of its investigations." I want to bring in political analyst Rick Stengel. He's also the former managing editor of Time magazine. Mark and Melissa are here with us as well. Rick Stengel, just explain to folks how norm busting seems like such a lame word in the time of Trump 2.0, but just explain sort of the lines that presidents of both parties have respected when it comes to the First Amendment protections typically afforded to journalists and the press.
Yes, Nicole, and you've been on both sides of this issue. I've been on both sides of this issue. No administration likes leakers, and some administrations go after the messenger, i.e. the person who has used the leak and published it in the New York Times or the Washington Post. And the difference with the Trump administration is they seem to feel that journalism itself is a crime. They don't like leakers. They want to go after leakers, but they're also kind of promiscuous in going after reporters in all kinds of areas. And this goes back to Trump calling the news business fake news, goes back to his famous statement to Leslie Stahl when he said, you know, if I lower the opinion of you that people have, they're not going to believe what you say about me. So this is something that they've been doing since day one. And this idea of taking journalists to grand juries is pretty extreme. But there is, and our, you know, my compatriots here can talk about it more than I can, but there is a famous precedent for that, Branzburg versus Hayes from 1972, that did compel reporters to testify about a crime to a grand jury. So there is some precedent for this aspect of it.
I mean, Melissa, I guess that would require, though, the country to trust Trump to tell us what the definition of a crime is.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, this is the whole point of these actions and these efforts with the media companies, with the courts, this exercise of filing lawsuits, losing lawsuits, delegitimizing the courts that issue those rulings against him, delegitimizing the press that would dissent or would criticize him or otherwise be skeptical of him. This is the whole point, as Rick says, like there's his truth. And when he advances that truth, if it's met with dissent, if it's met with criticism or objections, then the ultimate goal is to delegitimize or undermine that truth with a different truth, his own truth. And so this is just, you know, part of what is happening. The assaults on the journalists, I mean, and the courts, I mean, they really ought to be understood in tandem. These are assaults on institutions that are the most potent checks on this presidency that we have right now. And the point of delegitimizing them is to remove those sources of authority as checks.
Mark Elias, this is also a Todd Blanche story. This is like the desire that Donald Trump has deeply held and nurtured since 2017 to indict Comey. I think the first New York Times story about Trump wanting I think Jeff Sessions was his attorney general then, came out in 2017. So indicting Comey wasn't really a Trump story. It was about all of the attorneys general who said no, Sessions, and then Whitaker, and then Barr, and then Bondi tried but failed. Todd Blanche said yes. This is CNN's reporting on Todd Blanche's role in the extraordinary subpoenas for journalists. CNN reports that Trump's DOJ withdrew subpoenas targeting Washington Post and Wall Street Journal reporters. Officials familiar with the matter told CNN that Trump personally pushed acting Attorney General Todd Blanche to issue these subpoenas. The president delivered the message with the word treason written in Sharpie on a stack of printed articles he handed to Todd Blanche.
Yeah. Look, I think that what we are seeing here with the journalists is just the latest iteration of something we have seen through his entire administration, which is the systematic abuse and weaponization of the Department of Justice against his political opponents. And I think we are doing a real disservice if we don't realize that, you know, when he goes after James Comey for taking a picture of seashells on the beach, a whole bunch of former FBI agents are outraged. And when he tries to indict a bunch of U.S. senators and members of Congress for telling members of the military that they took an oath of office, a whole bunch of Democratic elected officials get outraged. When they subpoenaed the governor of Minnesota, a whole bunch of people in Minnesota got outraged. And now they are going after these members of the media, and people in the media are outraged. What we need to do is all understand that the outrage in each and every one of these is the same. The same Department of Justice that is prosecuting James Comey over a picture of seashells is the same Department of Justice that tried to prosecute Tish James. It is the same Department of Justice that tried to subpoena Tim Walz. It is the same Department of Justice that seized ballots in Fulton County. It is the same Department of Justice that just hours ago, Donald Trump said he called up the U.S. attorney in California and told him to change the results of the primary election, and it worked. Like, this is all the same Department of Justice, and we need to all understand that these are not isolated instances. This is what Donald Trump wants to do, to wear down his opposition. Obviously, the media plays a large role in that movement, and this is an affront to everything about democracy.